Okay, so for 10.2, we're going to measure arcs. And we're going to measure arcs, and then we're going to talk about arc lengths. And so let me identify or label some things. So if we have a circle, and this circle here has a center P, and if I have an angle, in other words, if I slice out a piece of a pie, and I'll call this A and I'll call this B, then we could say that angle APB is a central angle. Now, central angle is just an angle that has the center of a circle as its vertex. So we would say that that is a central angle. Now, when you have an angle like this, then we could say that the measure of AB, and then we draw an arc over AB, because what we're talking about is this little section here is a minor arc. Okay, so now what that means is AB, this arc right here from A to B, is a minor arc, and the formal definition of a minor arc is that a minor arc, it's hard to describe, but there's a formal definition. So let me start with the informal definition. A minor arc is associated, it's the smaller one, but it's usually less than 180 degrees. Okay? So if I were to label this, the measure of angle APB is, say, 50 degrees. Okay? Then that would mean that that is a minor arc. Now, if I draw a diameter over to this other side here, and I call this C, then we would say that the measure of APC is 180 degrees, because the diameter contains 180 degrees. In other words, I'm measuring from here to here 180 degrees. Does that make sense? So that's what we would call a semicircle. So we could say that the measure of APC, that arc there, is a semicircle, and so that's because it equals 180 degrees. Okay? And then lastly, the major arc, so this is a minor arc, and then from here to here, that's a semicircle. And then if I talk about the measure of ACB, that's going from here all the way around to the measure of angle B. That's what we call a major arc. that means more than 180 degrees. I realize I just thought of this. I should be saying less than, greater than. So instead of saying more, let's say greater than. So for example 1, what we want to do is we want to identify the parts of these. In other words, this whole thing here, from here to here, that is the major arc. But let's go ahead and find the measures, because that's what we're talking about, is finding the measures of the arc. So then what is the measure of arc AB? Well, that's just equal to the angle, the central angle. And by the way, every angle that I've listed is a central angle. So that's equal to the central angle AB. Okay? And so the arc is talking about the length from here to here. We can measure it if we know what the central angle is. So the central angle is 50 degrees, therefore so is the arc. So the central angle equals 50, then the arc equals 50. So the arc is referring to this length. Remember, arc is a section of a circle. Okay? And we measure this based on what the central angle would be. So if this is 50 degrees, then this would be the measure of AB equals 50 degrees. Okay? Then I say, what is the measure of the arc APC? I'm talking about measuring from here to here. Well, that's equal to the measure of the central angle APC. In other words, the measure of the arc APC is equal to the central angle, which is 180 degrees. Okay? And now lastly, to find the measure of angle APB, or ACB, you can... Now this is where it gets a little tricky, because we're actually measuring the measure of angle APC, or not APC, APB, or oh, you know what, I realized I just wrote this. Yeah, it's APB. Well, so this is complicated. So I'm trying to think of, I'm sorry that I'm pausing and delaying, but I'm trying to think what is the best way. What I'm trying to say is, what is this angle here that goes all the way around here? If I say APB, then what happens is, I could be talking about the inside, right? APB. But if I say ACB, it's hard to determine. So usually what we do here is we would say that ACB, in other words, if we're measuring the arc ACB, that's equal to 360 minus the minor arc, which is the measure of AB. In other words, that would be 360 minus the measure of AB, which is 50 degrees. So the measure of ACB would be 360 minus 50, which is 310 degrees. Okay? So there's a couple of ways that you could figure that out. If I wanted to label everything, from here to here is 180 degrees. This whole thing has to add up to 360 degrees. So the measure of CPB, this would be 130 degrees. Okay? So that is, these are just my notes. This is not quite the example, but we're going to do the example in a second. But I just wanted to explain quite thoroughly how to measure the minor arc and the major arc and what a semicircle is and what the central angle is. So let's move on to example number 1. So for example number 1, we have a circle that center is not necessarily in the center. And then a diameter. So this circle is P, this circle is T, this circle is R, whoops. And they're always going to give you another point on the circle because that's how you determine what the minor and major arcs are. And so this angle right here, they tell us, is 110 degrees. And they want us to find the following. They want us to find the measure of RS, the arc RS. They want to know the measure of RTS, the arc. And they want to know the measure of RST, that arc. So the arc from here to here is 110 degrees. So that's pretty easy. Where do I get that from? The measure of this arc is equal to this angle here, which is 110. Now this is a diameter, all right? I forgot to write that down, but in the textbook it says RT is the diameter of circle P. So that means from here to here is 180 degrees. Okay, so it's 180 degrees there. Consequently, from here to here, so this is a semicircle and the other part is a semicircle. So this sliver right here, this slice of pie here, when you add it to this arc, it has to equal 180 degrees. So this right here is 70 degrees. So when you add all three of these up, they have to add up to 360. So the measure of arc RTS can be done two ways. You could say 360 degrees minus 110, right? So this is, you could think of this as a minor arc and then subtract that from 360. And that is equal to, let me get my calculator. I know what the answer is, but I'm showing you guys, you should always use the calculator to get the right answer. It's a nice way to practice. So that's 250. Now another way that you could find that too is you just add up the 180 plus 70. That also equals 250. So, then it says, what is the measure of arc RST? So what is this from here to here? Well, that's the semicircle. It's going to be 110 plus the 70, which equals 180. Okay? And that's it.